Like, for example, in Pakistan, I'm from a collectivist society, and my mom says that we have to do this. My grandmother passed away recently, right? And they had to like throw funerals and put food on the table. And I was like, why? We're grieving. They're like, yeah, but people come here and they also take out the time to pray for your grandmother. The least we can do is offer them food. It has no benefit to us to do this, but we do it for society. Good Friday, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Weekly Muscle. I have William with me. William has joined us again, and no wonder why, because the last conversation was amazing. So me and William want to do this more often, and let's see if you guys like our conversations more than you like other conversations. Let's see how that goes. So William, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here talking to you again. We have been going back and forth on Messenger for a little while, and at some point, one of us just said, "I think we should probably just hit record on this conversation instead of spending all of our time sending voice notes." So
I thought that would be
here we
also.
are.
I also think that is also a very interesting way of recording a podcast. So imagine if you and I just keep sending things, and then after it becomes like the
Mm-hmm.
topic ends, then the
Mm-hmm.
team can just collapse all that information and make it into like a podcast, like an audio podcast. And I feel like that would be
Mm-hmm.
more interesting to consume because it'll be always different days, and like like right now we're
Uh-huh.
sitting, we're gonna be talking it continuously, sure, but we
Yeah.
already know what we're going to say and we're going to try to like create tangents. But then it's like, okay, I you sent you a message, and then the day after I listen to it, and whatever happened to me at that day gets incorporated in my response,
Yeah.
and that I think
Yeah.
it adds more fruit and more
Yeah.
substance to the topic. So I do like that. We can try that out once, but
Yeah.
that will be an audio
I
only thing.
that crossed my mind actually when when I was sending you a voice message. I said, I wonder if we could just stitch these together and make a podcast out of it. And the benefit there is that I think that when I listen to your voice message in the car and then I get home and I'm doing some stuff and then I finally have a minute to reply, I'm gonna sound way smarter. I'm gonna sound way smarter in what I have to say.
You can articulate your
So
thoughts better, right? It's like you're not on the
yeah.
spot then. Right now, I was in the middle of a job interview, right? And like as a freelancer, I have to keep giving interviews all the time, right? I have to keep giving
Yeah.
talk conversations, always have the pipeline filled, right? So you keep talking to people.
Yeah.
So I was talking, and I have my like my interviewing skills to the T. So there's something I'm also
Yeah.
launching a roundtable about, is to teach people interviewing skills, because as a freelancer, you do it so much that I have built like a toolkit and a system that I know it works. So I was pretty
Huh.
confident. I was like, you know what? I know what to say. I know the questions that are gonna come. It's pretty easy. I got this. But then the person throws me a random question, and it was such an interesting question. He says to me, "Okay, uh, imagine you were me. What question would you ask yourself, and what would your answer be?" And I was like, my God, this is interesting. I never thought of this. you know? So I was
yeah,
put on the spot there. So yeah.
that person, what that person was doing was they're like, this is going to sound really smart, and it's going to totally hide that I have no idea what question to ask this guy.
Could be, but the guy made his point very clear, right? It
It
sounded very
worked.
smart
I
to
mean,
me. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's the point, that we get on, we get on the spot, and sometimes when you let it simmer
yeah,
and don't actively think about it, sometimes some beautiful thought comes out of it. So I do
yeah,
like it. We can try it out, and that way also it's like it can be more real time, not like something we schedule and then we have to like
yeah,
uh, come up with a topic. But like, for next time, for now we have a very interesting topic
yeah.
we're going to talk about. So how the story started with our messenger talks, which by the way I realize it's a very American thing, because I just had a conversation with some other Americans, and I told them as well that let's stay in touch. And they said, yeah, you can email us. And I was like, yeah, I'm more of a WhatsApp guy. And they started laughing. And I was like, what happened? And they're like, my God, WhatsApp. They're Peruvian. So they were like, our
Uh-huh.
family forces us to be on WhatsApp all the time because they're all on WhatsApp, but we don't use WhatsApp
Yeah.
in the States. And I'm like, what the hell do you guys use? And they're like, SMS messages. That's all we use. And I'm so shocked. I'm like,
Yeah.
why? Why just a text chain? But so yeah, it's also an experience. You know why? Because I think you guys are allowed to send media through your text chain, right? It's
Hmm.
like part of the iMessage thing, and
Yeah.
also like even if you're sending it to an Android person with the blue bubble, can you still send multimedia?
Hmm.
But in
Yeah.
Pakistan, it was not included in the price of your product, right?
Uh,
So we were only
okay.
allowed to
Yeah.
send SMS, not MMS. So the only option was to enable data or like 4G, 3G, 2G back then and use WhatsApp to send multimedia to each other because there was no other way.
Mm-hmm.
And from that way, it
Mm-hmm.
just stuck to us. Right now, still, our thing, like our products, if you buy like a monthly package, it doesn't include MMS. It only
Hmm.
includes SMS. So
Okay.
maybe that's
Yeah.
why the adoption of WhatsApp in this region is different. So we were talking on Messenger, and we were going back and forth about what we were discussing on individuality. And I'm the personal opinion that there is a high rate of individuality in the Western countries, and because of that, that explains a lot of societal level issues that are happening in the West, in my opinion, right? And you're of the belief that no, those problems do exist, but I don't think it's individuality that is the problem. It is some other underlying cause. But then I was listening to a podcast about choice paralysis, right? And then I thought
Mm-hmm.
about it and I was like, isn't it interesting that due to our abundance of choice, it's like the paradox of choice, right? Even in that podcast I was discussing with this girl, she lives in Japan now, but she was raised in the US. And she said the biggest culture shock for me was when I went to the store, there was only like two or three brands of deodorant I could choose. While if I go to
Mm-hmm.
Walmart, there are like 30 different brands of deodorant that I can choose. And that
Mm-hmm.
confuses us. So from that, I thought about this. I was like, okay, that's interesting because yes, indeed, maybe an abundance of choice is a problem in itself that the West is facing because in the East part, you don't see this. Yes, there are different problems in Africa, in Pakistan, in India. People are dying of diseases, infant mortality rate is relatively higher, and people don't have money, and poverty is high. But if you're on the streets, on average, even if a person is poor, because I was raised in my environment, I do have people who are not at the same social, economic level as I am. I still see them happy. I still see
Mm-hmm.
them content. Religion also plays a role. In our religion, we are supposed to be content, but that's a separate problem. So
Sure.
this is where we stand. I personally believe that the abundance of choice also plays a role into the discontentment that the West has. And there's also another element of capitalism that I will bring on later. But this is where we stand, William. Over to you.
Okay. I mean, so I think that there is an element here of I think there's an element here of like when you're a hammer, everything is a nail. Um, so there is a you're I think that you're experiencing a degree of discontent in maybe a kind of a culture shock, maybe not a I don't know if that's really the right way to describe it for you, but there you came from a place where the system, where there was a much more collectivist system, and you're now living in a place that is a much more individualistic system, and and that is going to have like tendrils all throughout your experience, and many of the things that are frustrating for you, and for people in a similar position, and many of them are going to be related to that difference between like a collectivist society and individualist one, but not all of them and not completely. Do you know what I mean? um so we have I'm a pretty big fan of I get I get I get I get dinged all the time from people who read things that I write, and because I write in a very kind of equivocal way where if I'm writing something, I'll never say such and such is such and such. I'll always say it's almost as though, it is kind of like, it is sort of as if, you know uh because I think that almost there's so few like true black and whites in the world and in life, and when we're talking about individualism and collectivism, we're talking about really complicated things that have complicated sources. I mean, poverty increases the likelihood of collectivism. Wealth, wealth increases the likelihood of individualism. I mean, just as a society gets wealthier, as individuals get wealthier, they have to rely less on people, and they have the headspace to explore what well, this is what my family likes, but what do I like, and that's a luxury of having time and money to not have to you know not have to worry about that stuff. And so you can, and so these are complicated topics, and it's not going to just be under no circumstances is it just going to end up being, well, because of individualism, we have choice paralysis, just because of choice paralysis is a direct result of uh, of our individualistic society. And I think that both of them have some very real, both of these systems have some very real um, drawbacks. I mean, a collectivist society is going to emphasize kind of adhering to social norms, as a means of supporting what the society needs as a whole, which is a good thing. That's a virtue. But what if you really don't fit into that society? What if you're somebody who, what if you're interested in art and your parents want you to be, um, a construction worker? I don't know. I'm trying to come. Yeah, they want you to be a cobbler, for shoes, but you don't want to be a cobbler. It's like this is every lifetime B movie that has ever been made about a kid who doesn't want to follow his dad's footsteps. But I think it's, and that's stupid, and but it's also real. Like that is a real drawback. Individualism offers an opportunity for people to be individuals. Sometimes and sometimes at the expense of society, and sometimes not. Um, so I wonder if I veered way off of what you said. Can we just rewind? Does this have a rewind on us?
I can pick up on what you just said,
Okay.
right? So I get what you mean. I understand. By no means I believe that the answer is black and white, right? I completely
Yeah.
agree with you. But I
Yeah.
am of the belief that you can peel the onion,
Sure.
right? So this
Absolutely.
is one step in that direction that I'm trying to make it understand. There's always different dimensions, and that's the beauty of the information abundance we live in. You take
Mm-hmm.
any situation, you can have a political narrative to it, you can have an economical narrative to it, you can have a geographic narrative to it, you can have a religious narrative to it, you can also have an individualistic narrative to it, you can have a
Sure.
societal narrative, you can have so many narratives. But in reality, something has happened. And one of the
Yeah.
levers is in charge. We don't know which one. We're trying to figure it out. So I do get your point of views. I do disagree with some of them. So let's start with the first one that you said that as
Let's start
as
with the first one. Oh God.
as you said, as wealth increases, people become more individualistic, right?
Well, they
That
tend. I think there's a tendency toward. I don't want to say.
yeah, there's a tendency
You know.
towards, but then you have a good example of Japan. This is the
Sure.
third largest economy in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're quite collectivistic. China is the second largest economy in the world, and they're also quite collectivistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So US is the only one in the top three that is individualistic, and Japan is so collectivistic that in Japanese culture, if you like cannot do what do you mean? If you cannot fulfill your responsibilities to your family, you actually disappear. They call them suicides.
Mm-hmm.
It's more like a societal suicide. So you don't actually kill yourself, but you literally leave your family behind and everything, so that if your family can claim you died, but in reality you ran away because you couldn't handle the responsibilities, and you didn't want to bring the shame to the family for not being responsible, right? It is
Well,
so
that's actually.
collectivistic, Japan.
Or sorry. Continue. Go on.
Yeah, yeah, I know where you're going, and I do agree with it. But I'm trying to say it's still collectivistic in the
Sure.
sense that the society is so in charge of the norms that when
Mm-hmm.
people feel like suffocated because they can't handle it, they choose these routes to get out of it. And I completely understand how individuality helps here in
Mm-hmm.
trying to be more accepting that hey, I cannot do this, so I want to move
Mm-hmm.
forward. And I completely agree with that. What my concern is, it's twofold. Number one, in highly individualistic societies like the West and Chile or the US, you see familial bonds breaking because you want to be individualistic, right? But you have
Mm-hmm.
more cliques now,
Mm-hmm.
which are voluntary organizations that you're joining because now you're an individual. But that's also you're still finding a group, you're still finding a clique,
Sure.
someone to identify with, right? You're like, I
Sure.
am a cobbler, so
Mm-hmm.
I joined this cobbler guild, or I am an artist, so I hang out with
Mm-hmm.
other artists. So you're doing the same thing, but instead of now being familial, The kin
Mm-hmm.
based relationships, we're moving to skill or belief based relationships. So now it's like, I
Mm-hmm.
believe that I'm this, so I would rather hang out with people like this. So you're doing the same thing, but the paradox of individuality comes in here, which is the second part, is the choice, the consent. So you're like, I consent to this, I choose for this, so it's okay,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
great. But when you're one step in and one step out, that's where I feel like the struggle happens. Because when you're one step in and you're like, with kin-based relationships, you don't have choice, right? You were born here, there is blood, there is responsibilities on your head. In the collectivist society, you need to help, you need to do something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in these relationships, you're like, you know what, I can go, I can join, I can try, but then I can leave if it doesn't help me. And I think that's why we were also alluding to in our voice notes, right? The
Mm-hmm.
concern that I mostly have with individualism here in the West is the ease of or the lack of commitment that comes with it. So you're like, you know what? I can choose to do this. I went to Toastmasters. I went to two events, and the third event, I was like, nah, I don't want to do it anymore. And I left, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a very simplistic example of what I'm trying to say, right? If you invest in relationships, if you invest in friendships, if you invest at work, the first thought is not, okay, how can I add value here and build a long term stable thing? It's more like, how much value can I extract from here? Because as an individual, I'm maximizing my happiness, I'm maximizing my utility. So even all of my relationships are based on what I can maximize. And you gave
Mm-hmm.
me a good example of that, how I have a dog sitting, and I do dog
Mm-hmm.
sitting because I know someone will pay that back to me when I need dog sitting, but that's also a
Sure.
click in a community you built, right?
Sure.
A community you built of like-minded individuals who are willing to help out. But some of you will be like those who always want dog sitters but are not willing to dog sit. Might be
Sure.
one person that got kicked out after a while, but that's how
Mm-hmm.
the self-correcting mechanism works, right? So
Mm-hmm.
everyone tries to maximize themselves, and that's what we've seen time and time again in behavioral economics. In what do you call it? There is this game theory concept, right? The game theory is all about cooperation, and every individual is out for themselves. That's how individuality. It's the definition of individuality. It's out for
Sure.
themselves. So that's where I stand.
So, I mean, okay. So, I mean, there's an interesting thing. The what you were saying about China and Japan, and particularly in Japan, the kind of like disappearing oneself, um, is interesting because that strikes me as like a highly individualistic decision. So there is a collectivist society that is, in some cases, overbearing to a point that the individual says, I can't be a part of the collectivist thing. I'm going to do it. I'm going to make an ultimately individualistic decision, and I'm going to just leave all this.
Yeah.
And so is that, well, whatever. I mean, the, I certainly don't mean to say that wealth does not always lead there, but I also think that, well, like you see, like even within uh, wealthy nations with a high with high GDP value and everything, you have pockets of you have pockets of uh, greater expressions of collectivism where there is more poverty. In the United States, we have rural communities that may be poorer. They operate in a more collectivist way.
Yeah.
In urban areas where there tends to be a lot more wealth, more social safety nets, things like that, they operate in a way more individualistic way. So I don't, it is not a one-to-one thing. It's not money equals individualism always and perfectly. But in there is a kind of correlation, and I mean even within China and Japan, and I'm not an expert. I've never been there. I think I have like one friend from Japan, and he
I'm
hasn't
going
been there
there.
since he was a kid.
I'm going there in March. I will tell you how it is.
Okay, you let me know. Go and ask everyone. But my understanding is that even within those societies, there is a growing sense of individualism, um, and certainly, probably, certainly not expressed to the degree that it is in a lot of Western countries, um, but but I don't think that doesn't necessarily surprise me that if as individuals and communities within those societies become wealthier, a greater expression of individualism starts to emerge, in at least in pockets, maybe not as a national value system or something like that, Um, but to the other point, talking about sort of chosen communities. I mean, in the United States, we have kind of this, and maybe it's global. I don't really know, but there's this idea of the your chosen family. We have families we're born into, um, but a lot of people, those are not great relationships. And I mean, we can, you can say like, well, these are, your family that you were born into, these are permanent relationships. And a collectivist mindset says you make whatever is necessary work for that, for that unit, for that like automatic biological unit. Um, but those units are not those units are oftentimes headed by people who are exactly as kind of individualistic as we're talking. They're just in charge. It's like you have a matriarch or a patriarch who has such a strict idea of what their family should be or what they should be like, and it is oftentimes not really for the benefit of that family or that unit. It's because they like to be in charge, or because they were weak when they were a child and now they like to be powerful, or whatever. And that can be expressed, that can be filtered down through all of the people that are in this unit. And um and so there is this idea of like any community that you're a part of and that you're committed to, is that can be your family, and you can be just as committed to that. And I disagree that there is something inherently better about a family that you're born into versus one that you choose. I mean, I think that I'm not sure that there's any. I mean, the only real difference is like, is there kind of a draconian, almost like fascist requirement to fit the values and standards of a family you didn't consent to, versus a voluntary system to say I am paying in with my effort and my love and my attention into a community that I chose, or a community I was born into, um, and I can leave if that is not working for me, or if I'm mistreated, or if I'm not respected or honored in a way that seems fair. And to me, and it sounds to me like you're saying that's a highly individualistic viewpoint. And I'm saying, if that is individualism, then individualism is inherently better. But I don't think that's individualism. I think that is I don't think that that's the core of individualism. Like I think
Yeah.
that's what makes it really, really messy. I mean, you are going to have bad actors, exactly like in a perfectly collectivist society. It can work really well. I mean, there isn't really any real reason that a collectivist society needs to be formed around really trivial things like what you do for a living, or whether you're married by 25, or whether you have 3 kids and if you give them grandbabies, and like that isn't necessarily the values and core that needs to a collective needs to be formed around, but it often is, and that's
Yeah.
also bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, uh, and I mean, like I was alluding to in one of our conversations. It's like, we have, we have our in the United States, we have some of our more collectivist communities are actually kind of the sort of more right wing communities. Um, Sometimes kind of wildly so, and those also happen to be the communities that need to that are going to say things like, you need to be straight, white, married by a certain age, going to church every week, and these are, so that's the core of what that's the core of what our more collectively minded citizens, that's kind of what they expect of their members. Uh, Whereas these like more chosen families may be organized around things like community service, or making sure that people have a place to live, or and kind of a disregard for what I think a lot of us see as like trivial differences, like sexual orientation or gender or race or anything like that. You know what I mean? Um, I said I was going to try and be brief. Mm.
I really enjoyed the real-time realization that you had, but it's fine. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and I
You
agree
just
with
cut me
you.
off sometimes, Ahad. Just cut
No,
me
I
off. Just
I
be like,
think I've been
stop,
talking for a
William.
few minutes as well, so it's fine. But okay, let's try to bring it back, right? So I agree with you. I agree with you on a certain points that what you have in the West is collectivism sometimes breeds conservatism, and that breeds your far right mentalities. That's correct. That's something I can get on board with. And that's
Yeah.
why I believe collectivist societies are not really the end all solution to it. What I have a problem with in individuality is the lack of commitment aspect to it. So now, how this is how I explain using this for the right wingism that's happening in the West, right? Very
Hmm.
simply, you have a group of people who are collectivists who believe their society is the right society and they're going to do their very best to preach about their society. So these are
Yeah.
active voters. They're going to come out and they're going to support the right wing candidates because they think that's the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And they're very homogenous. Almost all of them believe the same things: white, straight, uh,
Hmm.
like church going, a bit of religion. So that's fine in the US.
Hmm.
On the left, you have more fragmentation. Why do you have
That's
more
for sure.
fragmentation? But why do you have fragmentation? Because of individuality. Because everyone can choose what they care about. Everyone can choose what they want to believe. And then because of that fragmentality, I like the word fragmentality, but that's not really a word. Fragmentation, right?
Let's
Uh,
stick with it. I prefer it.
So the fragmentation that has happened has led to more of a diluted societal system, because of which you have more right wingism in these countries, because those people are homogenous. They know what they want. They're out and they're going to get it by voting. These people don't know what they want. Until you employ rank-based voting, where they get to choose their ideal candidate, but then another candidate,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
another candidate, another candidate, then they will never be homogenized in a way. They're all like, if you
Sure.
don't support animals, I'm not going to vote for you. Okay, but you only have two candidates to vote for. Are you going to vote for the right person? No, no, then I'm not going to vote. Their individual choice to vote is hampering the societal progress, but they don't see it because they're like, it's my choice, it's my autonomy, I can choose to do. But I argue that it's your moral duty to be involved in the civic procedure because
Yeah.
you are part of a society. And that's what I mean, right? It's being, I don't care
Yeah.
about kin-based relationships, I don't care about families. I agree
Hmm.
with you 100%. If you don't,
Hmm.
if you were born in a place with abusers or whatever, why do you want to stay there? I agree. But
Yeah.
society is kind of a family, right? It's a family you choose to an extent. But a lot of the people of society you don't choose to be with, but you have to learn to be with them. Another example I'll give you. There's this very nice YouTube channel called Kurtzikart. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know.
I'm familiar with
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how to
So
pronounce it either.
it's a very weird name, but they usually talk about physics and science. But
Yeah.
they recently talked about, are we getting more is are we like, is it the end of humanity or something? Are we, is social media ruining us?
Hmm.
And they argued that a lot of arguments against social media don't make sense, like echo chambers. They're like, no, before social media, there were already echo chambers, because literally
Hmm.
there were echo chambers. Literally, you were in a place where people are there around you and you just agree to them. In social
Hmm.
media, you got to learn different perspectives. However, what they said was social media gave you a choice to hear the other side. Back then, you didn't have a choice. You
Hmm.
had bonds that kept you together. In the US, sports is a very good example. I don't know why, but you guys really, really love your sports. So,
Hey,
right?
don't look
So
at me. I don't know. I don't know anything about sports.
but like, for example, you have a left wing person, a right wing person. You might not agree with each other politically,
Hmm.
but you both support the New England Patriots. So
Hmm.
you're happily willing to sit side by side, putting aside your problems just so you can support the New England Patriots. And they said that was the reason society was okay back then. Now, now you don't have physical barriers anymore. So now it's not like, hey, I don't like William, he's my neighbor and he has a completely woke left mentality that I don't agree with, but I have to
Hmm.
see William every day. He gives me my coffee or whatever have you, right? So I need to go there. I do his laundry, right? I have a dryer machine. He's a barista. We literally help each other out. So I have to learn to live with William. I have to learn to sacrifice my personal autonomy a little bit for the benefit of society, because this is where I exist. In social media, the problem is there are no bonds like that anymore. Now I can choose
Hmm.
to swear at anyone online because I don't care who that person is, right? So
Yeah.
because of that,
Yeah.
that level of individuality has exceeded propelled by social media in my eyes, because now it's giving you consequences with, like, sorry, freedom without consequences, right? Freedom of speech
Mm,
without freedom of consequences. And this is the problem in a collective society, or in a society where individuals are coming together, consenting to do something together, our understanding of the fact that their actions have consequences. What I have a problem with the individuality in my head is, what I see mostly around me is people who think individuality means they can do whatever they want, whatever the
mm,
consequences. They don't care. They're like, it doesn't matter to me because I can get up and leave. To give you that
mm-hmm,
Japan example, I can guarantee you almost, because Japanese people are so collectivist, they don't want to do this.
mm-hmm,
They have to do this. So in a way, they're not happy. They're not being individual. This is the collectivist decision. They don't want to uproot their life and go live somewhere else. They're like, we have to for my family, so that my family doesn't get pointed fingers that, oh, your son or your daughter was a bad actor. You have to do this. And because of that, they prefer to go somewhere else. So it is a more of a collectivist decision in my head, but it's an individual decision in your head. So that's already a very interesting point of view. But that's
yeah.
that's where I stand. I
Okay.
love this back and forth though.
Yeah. I just set a timer. Let me give myself 90 seconds. What can I say in
No,
90
no, no, no,
seconds?
no, 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 no. That's not allowed.
um, I think, obviously the only place that I can really say much is on, the United States. This is what I know, but there's going to be a degree of truth elsewhere. But I mean, a lot of what you were describing politically, first of all, is very interesting. Um, but I think that it is not. I'm not sure that it's an individualistic issue as much as it is kind of a problem inherent with our specific political system, which is so polarized into just two parties. We have we have no viable third party. So every election is a question of, we have one party on the right who all says various shades of the same thing, and on the right, on the left, on the left, the right, the left, on the left, we have um, we have we don't have people saying various shades of the same thing, and so you do end up with coalitions. But I don't think that we have people saying, oh, I don't want to vote because it doesn't work for me. What you have is a coalition that says, we need a candidate that represents us also. And so politics on the left is really, really complicated, because uh, there are people who are on the left who have different values from other people on the left. On the right, so to a certain extent, you just have, like, how much do you hate the brown person, like, and that's that's not fair. I know some very reasonable conservative people. So that's an overstatement, but kind of not. But so it's complicated, and because of our political system, because we have a political system that it forces just one of two options. I think what you have more than anything is not people making an individualistic decision to say, like, well, I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton because she doesn't perfectly represent the considerations of the intersectionality of trans rights and immigrant something. I don't know, come up with a million different intersecting points. That's not what's going on. People are not, I don't think, people are not refusing to vote because they are not personally perfectly represented. They're refusing to vote because it doesn't feel like it matters. Like, and it's not, and that's the whole thing, is it's like, if you're given a false choice, it's not exactly an individualistic, selfish decision to say, well, I'm not going to participate. It's almost more like a deflation of, like, what? I'm not really sure what the point is. It doesn't really seem like it matters. It doesn't seem like people are represented either way. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's not, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I don't think it's not it's not strictly wrong, but it's just not that simple. I think, if and I talk about this with my partner all the time, where there's a concept of um, uh, ranked choice voting, and how that might be able to just help people feel like it isn't it isn't for nothing. The outcomes don't have to change if the same approximately centrist establishment candidate keeps getting elected anyway. That's okay. If the people can feel like, and various coalitions can feel like, yeah, it makes sense to participate because it does, participation matters. Do you know what I mean? And that's an issue right now, is that it's not like an individual saying, look, my candidate can't win and so it's a waste of time for me. It's like a candidate that vaguely represents me can't win and participating makes no difference.
Yeah, but
So
to me, that sounds very similar. You're saying it in a very
it
like,
is. I mean, it's a subtle difference, but it's like we're talking about the almost like the individualism of a coalition. It's like on the left we have 60 different coalitions that represent in like communities, which within those communities operate in a collectivist way. Do
yeah.
you know what I mean? That so
Mhm.
it's like a collectivist society. Um, many of them can exist alongside one another, and that's kind of what we have. We have a lot of individualism, but we have a lot of collective, like individual collectivist communities that are just smaller. They're not national, they're not as big as the whole country, you know
Yeah.
and those communities as a whole, it's almost as though like that community acts in an individualist way. As a community it acts in an individualist way, but I don't think that's actually, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how big a difference that is. Honestly, I mean, every country there are going to be there are going to be variations of values in every country, and there are
Yeah.
going to be sort of collectivist communities around those values,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then ultimately, like they're all going to kind of act in an individualistic way as a community. How big is the community is the question. Go on.
Yeah. I understand you, but I have a very interesting point of view. We'll do a thought experiment first. Let's
Okay.
try to clarify the thing about the United States and the two-party system.
Mm-hmm.
I understand your point of view, but in the Netherlands, for example, we just also voted for a very far right party. All
Mm-hmm.
right, they're the
Mm-hmm.
leading party in the Netherlands, and this party literally says, "I'm gonna." This is their manifesto. I'm not joking. I would demolish all the mosques that are in the Netherlands. No immigrants are allowed to come in. Uh, People are not allowed to wear hijab outside if they want to. Muslims should be banned from coming into the country, and so on and so forth. So this is literally their manifesto,
Mm-hmm.
right? So this does not seem like your average centrist party, right?
No.
Th- 35 to 40% of voters voted for this party. Like, so no, 25 to 35% of voters voted for this party, right? Is the largest party in the Netherlands. The Netherlands does not have a two-party system. It has a coalition system. So
Mm-hmm.
if you get outright majority, you get outright majority, but they never get outright majority. Why don't they ever get outright majority? Because people always want to vote for who they align with. So there's literally a
Mm-hmm.
party called Partij voor Dieren, which means party for the animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a party which is a more leftist party. And if you combine those two parties together, they would be the leading party in the Netherlands. But people vote
Mm-hmm.
for them separately, although they represent very similar leftist ideals. But one of them has a different agenda. So now this is my question to you. This is a very good point you said. For me, where individuality stands is, if my belief system, if my cause is not being heard, it doesn't matter to me. In the Netherlands, 75% was the voter turnout. So 25% people did not even come out to vote. Why? They were thinking exactly like Americans, but they have a myriad of choices, right? They have a myriad of choices. They have a animal party, they have a leftist party, they have a right party, they have a Christian party, they have a Jew party, they have so many parties. They didn't come
Mm-hmm.
out to vote because they're like, it doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Mm-hmm.
should matter to you because it's not just your individual right to vote, it's your moral duty to be involved in the process of supporting society, and their foundations. So now my question to you, the whole problem that's happening on the left with the
Mm-hmm.
coalitions and everything,
Mm-hmm.
why can't all of these get back all of these parties and coalitions and communities come together and just back one candidate? Why? Because the first thing they're doing is they're like, okay, where am I being represented, where are we being represented? And that's the crux of individuality, right? It's about my choice first. Okay, what if we don't represent animals this term, but we do represent immigrants who are humans and at least beat the other party who wants to kick them out? Isn't this the moral choice? Yeah, sure, but what about animals? It's not about animals right now. It's about them. Can we support them? Yeah, only if we support animals.
Yeah.
Do you get what I
Let me
mean?
ask you. Let me ask you: Is in the Netherlands, is that a winner take all system, or is that, well, actually, I don't really quite know what that means. Are you guys using a ranked choice system, or are people
No,
just
no, no. The same thing. So my wife and I voted for the Partij for the Deer and the Party for the Animals. And my wife was very mad. She was like, we should have made a strategic choice. We should have gone for PVHH. I'm like, what is PVHH? They're like, that's a leftist party. And I knew they were going to win. And they like the top party won 35 seats out of 135, and this party won like 20 seats. So she was like, we should
okay?
have voted for them, and that should have been a strategic choice. This is our ideal choice. So if we had a rank-based voting, then this would be number one, and PVHH would be number two, and then
Yeah.
PVHH would have gone or taken our seat. So it doesn't happen ranked choice here, and it's not winner takes all. It is majority. So now a
Okay.
coalition needs to be formed. But
Okay.
this is what I was discussing with my Dutch basically citizens around me, and I told them, I said, well, isn't it possible that we could just skip the largest party and make a coalition with the rest of them? And it is theoretically possible. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, but in the next election, that party is going to win more votes because the people are going to say, we voted for this party. This is the biggest representation of what the people want. Why aren't you giving them a chance?
Hmm.
So it is a vicious feedback loop that this party
Mm-hmm.
isn't good, but if you don't give them
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity to screw it up, which they will, and this is what everyone on the left is saying, they're like, yes, let them come in. They're gonna screw it up. They're gonna run some very stupid policies that their people are gonna realize that this was a mistake. In the next term, it's gonna self-correct. Sure. But I don't want to wait 4 years for that because that's exactly what happened in the US as well. With the whole Hillary Clinton problem, as you were saying,
Mm-hmm.
they're the same. It's a false choice. It's a false choice. But you saw the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why in the
Yeah.
2022 election, there was more turnout than the
Mm-hmm.
2016 election, mostly on the left
Yeah.
side. Why? Because they were like, you know what? We don't want that. We want
Yeah.
this.
Well.
you know and now
um,
but after this, the same problem right now, because of the whole Middle Eastern conflict, right?
mm-hmm.
A lot of Muslim citizens, and there's like a lot of big celebrity or big personalities on Twitter are saying all of this stuff, that I was okay with Biden, but after I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing how he's fumbling the Middle Eastern conflict, I don't know who I'm going to vote for in 2024, or I don't know who I'm going to vote for. The answer to that one person gave, he was like, but there are only two choices. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't go for Biden, are you voting for Trump? And if you're not voting for Trump, you are still voting for Trump by abstaining, because the same problem, the
Yeah.
people on the right are going to
Yeah.
vote no matter what. They're a homogenous group. The left is the problem where people are fragmented. And again, going back to my initial conversation, I feel like that is only because the individual drive to bring our stuff first, because our priorities, our beliefs is more important than the collective societal beliefs and societal problems. This is my only issue with individualism. Nothing else. I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree to your right to be whoever you want to be, your right to do whatever you want to do, your right to consent and everything. But it becomes very difficult for you as an individual to care about someone else without it actively affecting you in any way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that's what they do in collectivist societies. It's not just this, like, for example, in Pakistan, I from a collectivist society, and my mom says that we have to do this. My grandmother passed away recently, right? And they had to like throw funerals and put food on the table. And I was like, why? We're grieving. They're like, yeah, but people come here and they also
Mm-hmm.
take out the time to pray for your grandmother. The least we can do is offer them food. It has no benefit to us to do this. But we do it for society. Although there's a separate debate that is this the right thing or not. So your society should know that this is not a right thing. This is a grieving family. We should not burden them by making them take care of us by feeding us. But on an individual level, you always think like, okay, is this beneficial for people? That's the difference between an individual mindset and a collectivist mindset, or just like a societal mindset. That it's not about the starting conversation is not what can I get out of this. The question is how can I add value to this so that everyone becomes better off. And I
Sure.
think that is the biggest switch that I feel like I want to see.
It's interesting hearing about your. It's interesting hearing about your the politics where you are, the even the political system, because I know basically nothing about it. I my knowledge of the topic is up 100% since this conversation started. um, and it is interesting in your context. It rings far louder, the idea of making, like your wife was saying, like making a strategic vote makes significantly more sense. um and I mean, I feel very confident that most of the people, when they vote in our elections, somewhat counterintuitively, are actually making a collectivist decision. They're choosing the lesser of two evils.
Yeah.
Um, where that now, also, you said like your turnout was 75%. Uh, Congratulations, my man, because I'm pretty sure our turnout is like 40% or some like absolutely embarrassing number. I don't know. Actually, I'm not going to Google it right now. It's really low though, and it's very, very upsetting. Um, you know, and uh, I don't think that is a. I don't think that's a. I don't think that that's a collectivist or an individualistic reflection. I think it's a demoralization of like, this has never mattered. I've never seen it matter. I've never seen, and especially leading up until 2016, there were like the day-to-day consequences within society of elections were very subtle.
Yeah.
The left and
Minimalistic.
right,
Yeah.
the left and
Yeah.
right were just kind of different flavors of the same sort of thing. Like, I don't know, like my community seems to be okay. Trash is kind of always a problem. Crime is always a little bit of a problem. It doesn't really seem to matter who's in charge, and that just kind of is how it is. And I think that, decades and decades and decades of that has people feeling like a really significant chunk of the population feeling like, it's just the thing that I don't know. It doesn't really matter. And it's not really them saying like, this doesn't matter to me. It's them literally saying it doesn't matter at all. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like almost as if like, well, that's a terrible analogy. Never mind. Forget that. But, um, you know, and, so but the people who do vote in our general election, so I don't know if we have a primary system.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with yeah, so the place where these battles kind of end up getting fought, and we have this like crazy fragmentation, is in our primary system,
Yeah.
where the general election candidates are actually chosen. And in 2016, that's where you saw, on the left in particular, that's where you saw things get really bad. They got really,
Yeah.
really bad, and
Yeah.
it particularly embarrassing because we had candidates like Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders and Liz Warren and I can't even
Andrew
remember them all.
Yang.
Andrew
Was
Yang,
it?
and these people are like fucking carbon copy clones of each other. They're like, Elizabeth Warren is kind of this policy wonk, and she's like, I think we should have, better protection, consumer protections, and also the gay people should be allowed. And then we have Bernie Sanders, and he's like, it's all about class problems and wealth inequality, and also the gay people should be allowed. And then Pete Buttigieg is like, I was a mayor and did a good job, and I am gay,
Gay.
and it's like, and there, I mean, and like, yes, there were nuanced differences between all of these people, without a doubt, but they were kind of all the same. And then, and the only thing that they had, the only difference that they had really meaningfully was that none of these other people were particularly well liked within like corporate establishment politics. And Hillary Clinton was kind of the one person, and she said all the same stuff. She's like, we need healthcare, and also the gay people should be allowed, but and banks, I don't mind the banks so much either, and it's like, and it got nasty. It got really nasty because I think that the collectivist, the sort of one of the kind of collectivist undertones within this country is like, the corporations are fucking us over. And maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe it's somewhere in the middle. I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle. but
No,
it
no,
is
no,
a felt
I
it
can
is a
say, I
felt
can
thing.
say they
You know?
are. I can say they
Yeah.
are because you can see it in the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there was, and after that, after all that happened, there was a lot of resentment, especially toward the whole system in general. When there were a lot of Bernie Sanders followers were like, yeah, I would go with Liz Warren. A lot of Liz Warren's followers were like, yeah, I'd go with Pete Buttigieg. A lot of Pete Buttigieg's followers were like, uh, yeah, they're all fine, like but almost everybody who was interested in those candidates were also kind of like, not don't really like Hillary Clinton. We don't really like the whole like banks and big business thing. So when we ended up with that, a lot of people, I think, in that same way, a lot of people were kind of like, in a kind of collectivist way, saying anything but Hillary Clinton. She is the worst. Some Trump is somehow the lesser of two evils. Now, obviously he wasn't. Obviously he wasn't. But I don't think that was an individualistic decision. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't think that people were saying that individualistically. I think they were misguided and they were wrong. But I think that it was kind of a collectivist decision. They were saying, I didn't like how this turns out. I don't feel like this is like a shade of uh, leftist policy that I don't think represents enough of us. Like, it doesn't represent enough of this country, and so
But
let's
then,
try something different.
yeah, but then, yeah, that's true. That they went for the right, but a lot of them also chose not to vote. That is
That's
individualistic,
true.
right? So in the end, that's the thing. And even if you go to the right, to be fair, 2016 election, you can't blame too much, right? Because you're like, you never saw what Trump could be capable of. But
Sure.
people who know Trump, people who
Mm-hmm.
were seeing the MAGA rallies should know
Mm-hmm.
Trump is not the lesser of two evils. It's impossible. I look at the
Well, right.
2016
Well,
footage, I look at it,
I
and if someone tells me anything but Hillary, and they look at that video of Trump, and they go like, yes, I cannot fathom that in my mind. I'm like,
oh
seriously,
no,
are you,
I mean,
you know?
this is, I mean, like I was saying, we had decades and decades of it not really mattering that much
Yeah.
one way or the other, and also
Yeah.
decades and decades of various news media really saying like, oh, this other person, whoever they are, is the worst person that has ever been. So there's like also kind of a numbness to the whole thing where it's like,
That I can understand. That I can
okay,
understand.
so he said some bad stuff, but like, is it really that bad? I can't really tell. Like, and I mean, and where I'm sitting, I'm like, oh my god, yes, it's really that bad. What are you guys talking about? He's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
but I mean, again, my point, I think that my point is that I don't, within the United States at least, to abstain from participating in the voting process, I don't think that's really an especially individualistic decision, because it's so diffuse. It's so diffused into, this has never mattered. Like,
Yeah.
it has not mattered enough for it to register as a collectivist thing that we have to do.
Yeah.
I think that it actually is now. I think that the 4 years of Trump did kind of like, and especially like the overturning of Roe v. Wade and abortion rights and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Exactly.
I do think that has sort of snapped people into, at least to a degree anyway, into seeing seeing the voting process as kind of a collectivist thing. Like, you need to participate and you need to think hard about who you're choosing, even though it's going to leave a bitter taste in your mouth because you probably don't particularly like the person you have to vote
Yeah.
for. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I
Um,
understand. I understand, and I think we are converging, which is a
yeah.
good, which is very good looking at the time. I wanted to talk about choice paralysis as well, but I think that's a conversation for another time.
Sure.
Uh, because I understand that it might feel deflatorary, right? That, oh my God, what's the point?
Hmm.
And a group of people are saying it together, so it might sound collectivistic, but a collectivist identity is what So this is also kind of paradoxical, but a collectivist identity comes from the individuals inside it, right? Once the
Mm-hmm.
collectivist identity has become too like it's prevalent for too long, then suddenly it doesn't reflect who you are as a person. But a collectivist identity comes from somewhere. Like for example, in Pakistan as well, the younger generation doesn't care about these things, right? About funeral rights and about we have this word called "log kya kahenge." It means what will they say, right? It means literally means what will they say, and that's the motto my parents' generation lives and dies by. But that's a motto we don't care about because we're more individualistic, right? So we're like, I don't give a shit about you. What do you say? But my parent does. My mom cares if her mom says something to her about me. My mom cares if her aunt says something about me to me. Like for example, when I moved here, and me and my wife hasn't gone to back to Pakistan yet with my little daughter because I know she's gonna get sick there because it's like a 180 difference in lifestyle. So she is probably going to get sick here due to the water, due to everything. So I want to wait till she's a year old so she can handle it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there my mom says people are telling me that, oh, your son is never coming back. There is no point. He's become Dutch now. Leave him, forget him. And then mom tells me these things. Say, look, what are they saying? I'm like, mom, let them say whatever they're saying, but it affects her so much. It doesn't affect us.
Mm-hmm.
So there is this paradigm shift happening in our side as well. Like a paradigm shift is happening on the West. And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the problem that has happened is what we're going through is what the West went through hundreds of years ago, or like
Mm-hmm.
50, 60 years ago. But
Mm-hmm.
what you are going through now is basically a regression to the mean. After you become too leftist, now you're becoming too rightist. Now you're going to become
Mm-hmm.
again, it could become a bit to the, to the central side. And that only happens because individual identity, in my eyes, is the reason for all of this is because as an individual, you try new things. You're like, I want to do this. And if this didn't work, then Trump happened. And after Trump happened, you're like, you know what? I'll take this instead. But this wouldn't have happened in the first place if you would have been thinking about society as a whole from the start, but people don't. And that's in essence the whole thing. And of course we want to talk about capitalism, we want to talk about choice paralysis and how that adds to the value of this whole problem, but I think that we have to leave that for some other time. So these are my thoughts to end the conversation with. What are your thoughts to end the conversation?
Mm, what are the thoughts to end the conversation? I only have thoughts to start the conversation. I would like to say that the push to the right is not a uniquely Western phenomenon right now. The that is a that's happening globally in different degrees, but it's not just Western nations that are suddenly and inexplicably taking on like far right political, governments and stuff. Um,
Yeah,
so I
if
mean,
yeah,
I mean, a collectivist society is really just as capable of becoming reactionary and as a collective deciding that they hate a very particular group of people and creating a fertile ground for, some right wing government to exploit
yeah,
that. I mean, in some ways, a collectivist society is potentially more vulnerable to
yeah, yeah,
kind of fascist propaganda because they have a collectivist mindset about things. That can be used in the same way.
yeah,
So,
indeed.
but for a different reason. So,
Yeah, indeed.
you know, we
No,
I
but
think
that
I
makes it
think
easier.
yeah. Go ahead.
No, go for
Go
it,
go
go for
on.
it. It's fine,
I
go
was
for it.
going to let you end the conversation. I was
Nah.
so keep going, keep talking. I want this podcast to be one of your hour and 10-minute long podcasts.
so so I do like your point of view, but I think the reason where the fingers are pointed more towards, or like the attention is more towards the Western nation, is because in every place else, and this is also documented by political scientists, that the far rightism starts popping up in a nation when, as you said, it's reactionary. When people are reacting to something, bad economics, bad socioeconomic landscape, something
Hmm.
happening, and around the world that is happening in Brazil, in Egypt, in the Middle East, in Pakistan. Most of those countries are poor or getting poorer, or there's a cash trap, or there's an issue in Venezuela as well. They're now planning to basically what do you call it, invade Guyana, one side of Guyana. And the far right government there is basically enticing that violence. They've introduced new maps in schools where now Venezuela has
Hmm.
this extra part on the right. So that's because it's the fertile grounds for fascism or far rightism is always bad economic like system,
Hmm.
right? People don't have enough wealth, people don't have enough choice and everything. The why it's interesting on the West is because all indicators are strong. You're earning more money. You're more richer than you were before. You're more educated than you were before, and yet you choose to go on that side. Is the
Mm-hmm.
most interesting element, and I think
That's
that's what I
that's
wanted to.
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it's I mean, there's an aspect there where you could like. I'm not sure. I think that if we're talking about something fascinating about the fact that it is happening in the West, it is weird to say, well, it's happening other parts of the country for the reason of for economic reasons, but in the West, it's happening because of individualism, and that seems weird to me.
Yeah,
That seems
yeah,
like a weird kind of like,
that's a hard reach indeed. That I can
you know.
agree. That I agree. That it could be.
But
There are
but I don't.
myriad
I mean,
reasons.
I don't fundamentally disagree with you. I'm very much of the mind that individualism can and often does go way too far, and it comes with some great costs. And I think I am personally aware that does collectivism. Collectivism also carries a heavy cost, and it's hard to balance. But this is one of the things I like. This is one of the things I haven't really enjoyed about talking with you is that I think that you and I have an awful lot of agreement, but we have different perspectives on it. And that makes me feel a little bit smarter talking to you, because I don't hear you saying individualism is bad always. It's a terrible thing. We should be collectivist societies. And I don't think that you're hearing me say individualism is the gold standard. We should only be doing individualism. Fuck collectivism. Burn it down, Yet we're just far enough apart that I think it's kind of satisfying that we can kind of fight over the sort of like 10% on either side of the issue or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a learning process to learn from different people, and if you're talking with the same people, then you're literally in an echo chamber, right? And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy as well. And I think I learned from that as well, is that yeah, there's a different perspective, especially because of our upbringing, right? So I have another friend in Pakistan who also I like to argue with a lot, but we almost always converge. And he's also on this
Mm-hmm.
channel. You must have heard me talking to him a lot because we're Pakistanis. We're very similar in our mindsets. But with you,
Mm-hmm.
because we're so differently raised and different life experiences, that yeah, even if there is this touchy subject that we discuss, even if we want to agree to each other, there's still a degree and a variation in how we agree. Because you're like, yeah, it's not the same because I'm an American, I was raised here, I see the
Yeah.
values, and I'm like, yeah, I was raised here, I see these values, and I really think it really adds to the conversation. And having the ability to entertain a thought without accepting it, as Plato said or Aristotle said, is a mark of a good of a good mind. That you should be okay to understand that okay, this person saying something I don't agree with, but I will let them finish the sentence. I will not cut them
Yeah.
off, and I'm going to make my case, and I'm going to see okay, which are we getting more closer to a goal or not? And if not, that's also fine. At least I learned something, and I think
Yeah.
that's very very important.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, great.
thank you so much.
Next time let's talk about religious trauma. I want to hear about your religious trauma. I'll tell you all about mine.
Well, that's a touchy subject, but I would love to do that. I have so many stories, you have no idea. This is going to be so much fun. But thank you so much, William, for your time. And thank you so much, everyone, for listening. And I hope you like this show. Please tune in next time when we're going to be having a discussion, maybe on religious trauma. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already, do check out the roundtable. We are live with our first session already, and we are looking for the upcoming quarter participants. So if you think you want an accountability group where you come in and get shit done, Roundtable is the place to be. So sign up using the link below, and I'll see you there. Thank you so much.